man with many faces stood before the decrepit shrine, holding a bag of human bones, a rotting corpse of a fawn, and a branch from the oldest tree. He had come to summon the demon that had been told of in legend. A child's tale to most, but to the scribes of Litharius, they were all but fact. He had walked the 1,000 steps and through the harsh tundra, only to see a gray stone door crumbling beneath the ember mountain. The lanterns that pushed up from the dead ground still burned and danced on the frozen soil. The man knew a demon was here, and he had come to summon it. He laid out the offering beneath the door and pulled out an obsidian knife, cutting the palm of his hand and dripping it onto the bones, the carcass, and the branch. Then chanted a verse from old Alaria, which translated in the ancient tongue, "Take my soul, take my life, come to me, my endless night." Only no demon had answered. No demon had answered for 4 nights. He had laid down camp a mile back and trekked here each night when both moons lay dormant in this week of darkness. He only had 4 more nights to win the demon's favor until the new year fell on the land. Then he would need to wait another 63 weeks, another 500 days, until he could visit again. Until 60 weeks. He waited longer until the cold was unbearable, then wrapped his cloak around him and stood up, gathering his offerings to take. His hand reached for the fawn he had hunted in the Ophira wilderness. The mother tried to stop the man, but he had found her heart before any revolt. As he trekked up north, it had made for his dinner a fine venison stew with potatoes and carrots. It warmed him up every night before drinking himself into a stupor to do it all again. The wind kicked up as he touched the fawn. The flames that danced gracefully on the ground sprung to life, shooting up in rage and encompassing the darkness. The many-faced man stood up in shock. He stared at the spectacle as the fire grew. He smelt his skin burning, and his fur cloak caught aflame. A pair of pin-devil claws jutted out from a mange pin, burrowing over McClee's trousers. Panic showed in his iced eyes as he started to run down the mountain, down the stairs to his camp. But he only made it a couple of steps when the flames died and the darkness weaved back into place. A man does not take back his offering once that offering is given, a woman's voice echoed around him. As he turned and scanned the wilderness, there were no women, but the gray stone door was propped open through the darkness. "Come in," the women echoed from no direction in particular. "We have much to discuss." The silent the man knew the repercussions of walking away. It was written in the legend, offering your soul to something and then returning on your word was to forfeit your life. He knew he no longer owned himself, so he carefully climbed back to the door, stepping over the gifts he had brought, and into the stone door. Inside it smelt ancient, like the beginning of the world. It was sweet, like when the leaves start to die in the fall, the moss beneath rocks that sat stagnant for ages, the smell of the sun baking clay and coating the world. The man descended the stairs, heading beneath the mountains. Into the belly of the earth, the man wondered if the sound of his footsteps and frenzied breaths were the first sound of life to echo through the stone in centuries. The stone stairs reached the bottom, and the hallway before him was coated in darkness. At the end of the hallway, there was a single flicker of light. He followed it until he reached another door. This one was wooden and arched. It reminded him of a cabin he stopped at in Hythe. It seemed foreign beneath the mountain, as if a piece of the outside world was preserved. As he went to reach for it, the knob turned, and he was staring into what seemed like a living room. The fire bloomed in the hearth as something sweet cooked in the cauldron above it. Chairs and a table sat in the middle, and different flora and fauna hung from the walls and ceiling as decor. A woman sat in a chair by the fire. "And why has a scribe from Litharius with many names and faces come to me?" she questioned, her smile arching unnaturally. The man did not answer, he only studied her face. It was not one of the demons he had imagined, big, beastly creatures with horns and eyes of pure black. Creatures that could kill you with one look in their eyes. No, she looked like a goddess. Her features were soft and warm. She had red hair that seemed to curl around her body and tanned skin that was freshly sun-kissed. Her red lips were plump and full, and her eyes the color of the sky. He stared into them and thought he saw a glimpse of the universe. He had not pictured this, and the shock left him speechless. He finally looked up and saw a clump of trees disappearing in the distance. The weight had worn them out of their shells. The demon spoke. "Not what you expect?" She giggled as she gracefully rose from her chair and floated to the man. She grabbed his face and whispered in his ear, "Well, you are mine now, so you must answer. What shall I call you? Why did you come to me?" She pulled back and studied his face carefully. "My name is Aleph. I am a scribe from Litharius. I have come..." The demon laughed, showing her two white teeth. "Aleph, a scribe from Litharius. You are a liar, and a bad one at that. You cannot lie to me. I own your soul." She slipped through the chairs and danced to the cauldron. "Since I own your soul, I can do what I please, and if you lie, it would please me to kill you." She took a sip from the boiling pot and set the spoon back in. Aleph pulled his satchel from his shoulders and sat it on the table. He pulled out charcoal and slightly burnt papers from the flames outside. "I do not lie." He stared at her, looking for an introduction, but she only stared back. "I have heard legends and stories about you, the demon who lives under the mountain, the one that takes souls in return for something of value. I have heard that you can gift a man anything they dream of, that you've lived for centuries and have seen wars in times unheard of to man. You are not of this world, am I right?" A glow rose from Aleph's eyes. "You can gift me a story?" Another laugh came from the demon. "You want a story from me for your soul? Seems like an unfair trade, don't you think?" Aleph smiled. "If I had a story from a demon on my account, I could have fame and riches to my heart's desire. I would not have to live among the scribes deep within the library." Not a lie. The demon sat on her chair and pointed to the one before her. "Sit," she commanded. "Now." Aleph listened and found the chair opposite of her. "And what kind of story would you want to hear?" Her eyes grazed the walls of her room. "Maybe the one about the god of fire? He who became so obsessed with power he burned down whole cities and, when he grew tired, turned himself into a dragon and locked himself away." She shook her head. "Or I could tell you about the god of war. It is a sad story that involves killing everyone you love, only to have a pile of corpses in your wake." She looked at the man with gentle eyes. "Do any of those pique your interest?" "And of course it does." Jason rustled with two tiny moans. Aleph took his charcoal in his hands and lifted the paper. "I want your favorite story. One that you would be passionate about telling. One that is not legend or myth. Something tangible, something real." The woman's eyes grew light, the universe in them dying, and she seemed to change. Her eyes turned a moss green, her hair charcoal black and her skin paled. I have relived this story multiple times, for these souls and their stories are mine. Their name is Aleph Branwell. He lived in a time you do not remember, or ever will. The story starts with a summoning of a demon and ends with the loss of life. As I leaned in closer to the table, her face was changing to mirror my own. I stumbled back, knocking over my papers and charcoal, sending them clattering to the floor. The demon smiled, my smile. I ran to the mirror hanging on the wall of the room. I had changed too. I was her. My black hair was red, and my pale skin was tanned. As I looked into the mirror, this face became familiar. It felt like it belonged to me, and I sank into that familiar. Memories that were not mine rushed into my soul. I felt like I could see it all. As I turned around, Aleph Branwell sat at the table gathering his things. "Thank you so much for inviting me in. I have to be going." He packed up his charcoal and bag of papers and left me in my solitary. I had been here for 1,000 years, and I would stay here for 1,000 more, waiting for another person to wander in the Ember Mountains. I could feel his hot eyes burning my skin, my neck, my back, my hips, and every other part of my body all through the summer. But every time I turned my head, his eyes, those hot eyes, slid away from me and settled elsewhere, on the door, the wall, the ceiling, and he would give that sly, spooky smile of his, the same horrid smile I had been seeing for the past 6 months, ever since he came to stay in the little room adjoining our house in Bethora. As a tenant, the thing that puzzled me was, how is it that Mama and Dada couldn't see what I saw? Okay, Dada is in the clouds half the time, but what about Mama? Silence. Whenever I tried to talk to her about him and the way he looked at me, she would laugh and say, "You're imagining things, baby. Ever since Sister Marcia gave your class that talk on sex education last year, you've become a little paranoid about men. Why, you even complained about your Uncle Francis the other day and got that haunted look on your face." "Well, I don't like the way he looks at me either," I replied, "or the way he puts his arm around me and squeezes me. I'm not 6 years old anymore, I'm 16. And he's got a scary face and has a haunted look." "Dear, dear," Mama sighed. "He's just being affectionate, my child. Can't you see that? You're just imagining things." But I'm not. I know what I know, especially where our tenant Naresh Solant is concerned. Creepy, horrible guy, slinking around like a ghost. I can't stand him, and that wide, unblinking stare of his, or that sly, ingratiating smile, or the way he calls me baby and tries to rub against me whenever he has to walk past. I hate his smooth, sallow, clean-shaven face and slick-back oily hair, and the long-sleeved white shirt tucked neatly into black belted trousers and his shiny, pointed shoes. I find him an absolute horror. I spoke to my friend Neethi about him and asked her if she thought I was imagining things. She's been here quite a number of times and has observed him minutely, and she says, "No, I'm not. He's really a creepy, slimy lech." He tried to talk to her as well when he returned from work at the Bethora Industrial Estate and found her sitting in the veranda of our house. Mama had called me inside for a minute, and Neethi was sitting in the rocking chair, rocking herself back and forth and humming a tune. "Hello, darling." He goes and puts his hand on her cheek. She got such a start she nearly fell off the chair, and then he squeezes her arm. "Sorry," he says. "I hope I didn't startle you, my angel," he says, and smiles that creepy smile of his. Mama finds him good-looking. I don't. He's much too smooth and oily for my taste, and a little too decent and good to be true with his "yes, madam," "no, madam," "of course, madam," when Mama's around. Quite frankly, I'm afraid of him. He's fairly young, 28 or so, and slim but wiry. It's his eyes that scare me. Hot, restless eyes, roaming all over my body and eating me up alive. Deepti was scared of him too. Deepti, my best friend and neighbor, who mothered me right from KE1 and disappeared suddenly without warning exactly a month ago, just like that. We were classmates and best friends, and she had confided in me once that Naresh, Mr. Creepy we called him, had asked her to accompany him to the movies at Jai Mahalsa one evening and not tell her parents. Deepti was slim and fair and pretty, like me. She's been my closest friend since K1. How could she just have disappeared like that? Her parents are beside themselves with grief and worry. The cops haven't a clue as to her whereabouts and have come up with this incredible theory that she must have eloped with a boyfriend. They even questioned me about that, but I told them straight out that she didn't have a boyfriend and that she would have told me if she had. And Deepti was dead serious about her studies, wanted to be a chartered accountant, and wasn't the kind to let anyone or anything get in the way of her goal. I told them that, and so did her parents, but I could see they didn't believe me. Here he comes now, Naresh, I mean, looking as dapper and decent as ever. White shirt tucked into black trousers, oily hair slicked back, and only his eyes, those hot, dark, restless eyes, giving him away. I know what I know. Never mind what Mama says. She'll be coming home late. Mama, I mean. Uncle Francis met with an accident this evening while riding his new Bajaj Pulsar. It's July, and the streets are all slippery, so he skidded off the road and fell off his bike. Fortunately, he was wearing a helmet, but he hit his head badly and fractured his hip, so he's in the ICU for the weekend. She's going to be back around 9:30 p.m. Otto Francis begged me to say that he's the dearest little boy in the world, and Mama should be back with him in 2 days. They hired Umeshi's taxi for the journey. I have my tests coming up soon, so I didn't go. There's food in the fridge, so I'm okay. I just have to warm it up. Actually, I could have stayed at the neighbors until Mama comes, but she had a massive fight with them over some silly thing 2 days ago, so I'm on my own. It's okay. I'm nearly 16 and can take care of myself. Besides, Bethora is a village, so it's pretty safe. Not like in the big cities. We've been here for donkey's years, and everyone knows everyone else. My, it's really dark outside and pouring cats and dogs. Thunder and lightning too. I've never seen a storm like this before in all my 16 years. Rather scary, actually. But I've put on all the lights in the house and the TV's on while I'm studying, so it feels like I've got company. Is that a knock on the door? It's only 8:30. Don't tell me Mama's back already. As usual, she's forgotten her keys and her mobile at home, so there's no way to keep in touch. Dada lost his cell phone 2 days ago, and our landline has stopped working. It always does that during a heavy downpour. Anyway, thank God Mama's come. I was beginning to feel lonely. The door latch needs oiling. It's a little rusty. You have to exert quite a bit of force to get it to open. Ah, there it comes. No, it's not Mama, it's Naresh, and he's already inside the house and has latched the door behind him. His eyes are all bloodshot. I think he's been drinking. What's that in his hand? Looks like a knife. and his eyes are hot and heavy on me. So hot and so heavy. I can't say a word, I can't even scream. He pushes me further inside the room, the knife pointing at my throat. It's the longest, sharpest, and shiniest knife I've ever seen, like in the movies. His eyes never leave me for a second. He pushes me back, 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 his hand heavy on my shoulder, right into the kitchen and up to the back door. He unlatches the door with his free hand, pushes me outside and follows me, closing the door behind him. Drags me into the dense thicket of trees adjoining the back of the house, deeper and deeper into the trees and brush, the rain beating down hard on our faces and soaking our clothes. The thunder rumbling louder than I've ever heard it before, jagged flashes of lightning searing the sky and lighting up the way before us. On and on and on, deeper and deeper into the trees, until we reached the old, abandoned, broken-down cottage that had belonged to my grandfather and is now falling to pieces. He pushes the door open and drags me inside, latches the door and gives me a violent shove that knocks me to the floor. He stands there, panting, soaked to the skin, his hair plastered to his head, a tangle of it hanging down his forehead and in front of his eyes. Those horrible, horrible eyes, hot and heavy on me, so hot and so heavy, like a weight almost. I suddenly feel very, very weak. He rips his shirt open, the buttons scattering everywhere, exposing a smooth, sallow, hairless chest. I try to get up, but he shoves me down again. I open my mouth to scream, but he holds the knife in front of my eyes. "Do you want to die?" he asks. His voice is low and matter-of-fact, but I can hear him above the thunder and the rain, above the crashing, the loud, loud crashing of the thunder and the rain. Lightning flashes through the broken skylight on the roof, sparking up the room, and I see a heap of rubble in the corner where the ground has recently been disturbed. He unbuckles his belt one-handed, and I struggle up again. He shoves me down with his foot and points the knife at my throat, the longest, sharpest, shiniest knife I've ever seen, like in the movies. He looks at the heap of rubble and back at me, those hot, hot eyes searing my skin. "You fight me and I'll kill you," he says, in that same calm, matter-of-fact tone. Only his eyes give him away, the hottest, scariest eyes I've ever seen, blood-red and animal-like. Like I killed her. It takes me a moment to catch on. He sees my eyes widen in shock and nods his head. "Yes, her. Deepti. She was your friend, wasn't she? She fought and bit and scratched, see?" He pulls back his sleeve and shows me the scratches on his wrists. "So I had to kill her. She screamed, so I cut her throat. That's where she lies." And he points at the uneven ground next to the mound of rubble. Terror engulfs me, such as I've never known before, a black, sweeping tide of terror. "Mama!" I want to scream. "This is all your fault. I told you, but you wouldn't listen." A sob wells up in my throat and comes out in a whimper. I know he will kill me. He can't afford not to after he finishes with me. He knows I'll tell. The rain hammers down on the roof harder than ever, dripping onto the floor wherever the tiles have been broken or dislodged. Thunder rumbles so loud that every other sound is blotted out, and flashes of lightning burst through the skylight and light up the room for a second or two. He kneels on the floor, puts one hand on my neck, and rips the blouse from top to bottom. I can feel the stink of alcohol on his breath. And then he pauses, like he's heard a sound, but who can hear anything above the thunder and rain? Even if I were to scream my lungs out, and even if he allowed me to, no one would hear. No one. But he pauses and slowly turns his head, as through he can hear something or feel someone's eyes on him. And then I feel it too. Clutching the torn blouse to my chest, I feel it too. Someone's eyes, clear and distinct. There's someone in the room. It's unmistakable. I see his body turn rigid, the cords in his neck standing out. The knife drops from his hand. I can actually see the hairs standing up on the back of his neck. A strangled scream bursts from his throat, and he stands up and backs away. "Oh," he cries out. "No, it can't be. You're dead." I gaze at him, fascinated, as flashes of lightning illuminate the room. I can see nothing and nobody except Naresh, backing away, abject terror on his face, his hands held up as if to ward off an unseen foe. And then, I see his feet rising off the ground, rising above the ground, as though something or someone, some invisible force, is actually lifting him up. His face and body convulse violently, and he scrabbles frantically with both his hands at the area around his throat. His face is mottled with blood. He gasps for breath, his torso thrashing about violently, his feet inches off the ground. For a long, slow, endless moment he remains like that, suspended in midair, hands scrabbling frantically at his throat, body thrashing about violently, his face turning purple, his head arched at an impossible angle. Then he drops down, limply, like a rag doll, in a lifeless, uncoordinated tangle of arms and legs, like a puppet dropped by a child, and lies there on the floor, his eyes staring sightlessly up at the broken-down roof and rafters. The storm ceases as suddenly as it had begun, the only audible noise being the sound of the rainwater dripping from the roof and from the leaves of the trees outside. The front door swings open and Belmont. And all this time I can feel those eyes, not hot and angry like Naresh's, but kind and gentle. I can almost see them, almost touch them. Kind, loving eyes, kind, protective eyes. Deepti was like that, kind and loving and very protective. Right from K1.